Hello and welcome to episode 117 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is November 4th, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
So,
Hi.
one topic that is probably top of mind for a lot of customers at the moment, and probably all of us have been impacted recently, is supply chain. For their digital supply chain solution, SAP has products like the SAP Integrated Business Planning, IBP, and the Ariba Network. So Microsoft is actually also a big customer of these solutions. And now, similar like the topic that Satya showed during his keynote at Ignite, where he demoed how to integrate an SAP S/4HANA public cloud system with Microsoft Teams, you can also extend SAP supply chain scenarios with Microsoft products. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Dominik Benedikt from SAP and Bartosz Dziarkowski from Microsoft to our podcast again. Dominik will talk about two blog posts that he has published a few weeks ago, where he integrates supply chain scenario with Azure Machine Learning and Microsoft Teams. But before we hand over to him, as always, let's take a quick look at some of the news from this week. And I actually want to start with two blog posts that are basically a continuation of what we talked about last week when we had this focus on sustainability on the Azure data centers, where we talked about efficiency, where we talked a lot about some cool projects that Microsoft is currently working on. And just 2 days ago, Noel Walsh, CVP for Cloud Operations and Innovation, released a blog post to share the latest improvements to efficiency in Microsoft data centers. And I think we covered actually quite a lot of topics. So Paul Edlund covered quite a lot of topics on this, but I still thought it was really interesting to really highlight again the power usage efficiency, the water usage effectiveness, and then also how we actually operate in different regions. So how does it look like in North and South America? What's top of mind in the European countries and Asia and Pacific and stuff like that? And what do we do? That was also something that I found really interesting, because especially we talked about cutting down trees to make way for some data centers, and then here now we're talking about what are we actually doing to improve the environment, trees, and the surroundings of our data center. So that was a really nice blog post that is basically just a continuation of the episode that we had last week. Another thing that just came up, what I found also extremely interesting, is sustainability guidance for AKS, for Azure Kubernetes services. So basically, how can you influence or have sustainability in your mind when you actually work with AKS? Are there some best practices? Are there some recommendations? And there's actually some really nice guidance, some patterns from this Green Software Patterns Foundation here, that explain what can you do when you're actually using an AKS service. So what can you do as a developer? And there is actually some documentation on this, and it talks about, look, considering these aspects can have positive and potentially also a negative impact. So, for example, applying sustainability software engineering principles can give you faster performance or latency by maybe lowering the total network traversal. So if you design your software that it's closer together, but on the other hand, there could also be a cost that, well, there is slower performance because you deal with higher latencies, because in the recommendation to really consider sustainable aspects, you put your development deployments in different regions or something like that. So I thought it was really interesting. I still think we're at the very beginning, that the developer, if they develop an application, that they think of these topics. But I thought it was quite interesting to see that these sustainability aspects are now not only on a data center level, on an Azure corporate level, but we're really trying also to provide some guidance to developers on these topics. So moving on, last week we actually said we would skip some news from the week to really put the focus on the session on sustainability. So Goran, one of the things that you brought up last week was the availability zones for Azure NetApp files.
I mean, that's some preview feature that basically you can deploy Azure NetApp file as a zonal one. Interesting is, I mean, we use NetApp is used in the SAP context, especially in the context of the databases, HANA, Oracle, yeah. This is and how the whole, I mean, NetApp is generally, if you don't use for the SAP, you can create the volumes and it will be created somewhere in the region, in some data center. However, for the databases, we can't just do like this because that could create a latency between the compute and the storage. And what we do basically, we need to pin the compute to a certain data center. In the past, we were doing pinning on the Azure NetApp, which is a bit complicated process. Luckily, that was improved. So with the application volume group, so we just pin the compute and NetApp would be automatically created in correct data center. That might be, let's see, that might be a kind of further improvement. The idea is if you maybe just go down a little bit to the picture, it's you can always deploy a VM in a compute in a certain zone. And then here is there also a feature to deploy a volume in a zone. Now, that does not guarantee yet the low latency or sub-millisecond latency for the database, but it's still, at least it could happen, it doesn't have, but at least it's a one step forward. Let's see if we can have this also as a part of the SAP features in the future. As long as we can guarantee the low level latency, I think that would be an ideal solution to remove actually any kind of the pinning, meaning the customer does not rely here on us. They can do fully by themselves, just deploy compute and the NetApp without any pinning. Would be great stuff, but yeah. I'm happy to see it as at least as a preview feature, right? Yeah. So if we go to the next one and talk about the storages, we were talking about the premium, just mentioned the GA of the premium SSD V2. I think that, so here, of course, there's always a question, okay, how to do it, use it in an SAP context. So fast storage is always for the database. HANA is the leading database here. The great stuff here in the past, we couldn't use, I mean, or at least we could use premium SSD V1 only for the log disk with the right accelerator because of the sub-millisecond latency, but only on the M series. So premium SSD offer sub-millisecond latency, meaning they could use for the data and for the log file both. And that's really that's a really a great value benefit here. The nice stuff is, so this is official document for the HANA itself, right? I mean, the nice stuff here, it's you have also fully separated, you have pricing per size, per IOPS and throughput, and this you can change. That's meaning you can really much better tune your not only performance, but also the pricing. And you can use it for the non-M, you can use on M series, but you can use also on different E series. So EV4, EV5, that's really great. There are some tips and tricks you can use on one disk, put it the stuff, but you can also strap it as well. Again, it's about some technical and pricing stuff. Anyway, just to make it sure, customer, we will go into deep in some of the future scenarios, just a little bit highlight, but just warmly welcome to check it. It's an excellent document here to check it for the HANA. Yeah.
Cool, great, thank you. Okay, moving on to another announcement. There was an announcement by Javier Fernandez on getting SAP events into Azure Event Grid. So we have actually been working with SAP for quite some time now to get events, and we're starting with S4HANA, SAP S4HANA on-premises events. via SAP Event Mesh into Azure Event Grid. And the beautiful thing there is obviously from a connectivity point of view, it's almost out of the box. So we're using the concept of partner topics on the Microsoft side, so it's fairly easy to connect then SAP Event Mesh with your Azure Event Grid subscription. And once you have done this, then getting events from your SAP system into Event Grid is actually fairly straightforward. And then obviously once we have the events on the Event Grid side, then getting this into something like, for example, Teams is really, really simple. So I have actually created a small video that outlines the whole scenario. And in my specific case, I just took an SAP system, obviously, get the event into Event Mesh. So in this case, I looked at a business partner event. And then once I have it in Azure Event Grid, I have multiple subscribers there. And one of the subscribers is posting an adaptive card into Teams. So really a very straightaway scenario. And I think this event integration, this is a pattern, this event-driven architecture patterns is something that we're seeing more and more with customers. So I'm really happy that we have this now as a preview available. So you can definitely sign up. There are some links and more information available where you can sign up for this preview program. So highly recommended to give it a try. Then one more thing that I was really excited about is in the area of the Power Platform again. So for me, what is really amazing is I think a few years ago, everyone started to infuse AI in everything basically. And where I can really see this happening now is here in the Power Platform. So I think we talked about the preview of this some months ago, where we had this capability that is also available in GitHub Copilot, basically, where you write something, then it translates this into actual code. And that's now what is GA in the Power Platform. So this transforming natural languages to formulas. So instead of picking out the right formula, you can just say, I want to sort this table by first name in a descending order or something like that. And then Power Automate takes this natural language and translates it into a PowerFX call. So I thought this is really cool. And then the other thing that is really fantastic that I'm using constantly basically is this transforming examples to formula. So not sure if you can see that, but there's a complicated date time string with the date and let me see if I can increase this here. Yeah. With the date and the time here, and maybe you want to reformat this, and obviously you can do this with regular expressions, but I always need to Google the right regular expression. Now you can just say, look, this is what it looks today, but I would like to have it in a different format. And then again, using AI, we're transforming this into the right regular expression to then provide you with the output that you're looking for. So again, for me, this is something where I can really see in the whole Power Platform that this concept of infusing AI is something that is really happening. So if you are using, if you are a Power Platform user, then I can definitely recommend to check this out. Now I'm trying to get a bridge to the next topic, to the last topic, and that is when you have a Power Platform and you want to connect to an SAP system, you need to have single sign-on. And the godfather of single sign-on between SAP and Microsoft is Martin Repple, and he's just continuing with his amazing blog post series on principal propagation in a multi-cloud solution between Microsoft Azure and the Business Technology Platform. And now he's calling Microsoft Graph on behalf of an SAP authenticated user. So this is now, we're in the SAP world, basically. We're authenticated on the SAP world. And now we want to call the Microsoft Graph to retrieve some information from emails, from Azure Active Directory, from a document that you have stored or something like that. And like always, Martin has a very detailed blog post and nice architecture overview. And then, as always, a nice step-by-step guide. This is what you need to do to get this working. So if you want to do this, if you want to consume Microsoft Graph services from an SAP point of view, then definitely check out Martin Repple's blog post. Cool. So that's all the news from this week. With this, I would really like to welcome again Dominik and Bartosz to our show this week. Dominik, maybe since you are the guest from SAP, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself. What are you doing at SAP? And then I'm really looking forward to the content that you have prepared.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Dominik. I work at SAP in the integrated business planning product, and I'm working in the foundation and integration team. And I'm working in the product management area, and most of the time I'm building proof of concepts related to integration. So when it comes to integrating IBP with external systems or within SAP applications, what possibilities do we have for the integrations, and what kind of APIs do we have from both the sides, and how do we build an integration? So this is most of the core topic where what I'm focusing on. And yeah, today I'm going to present some of the ideas that we have experimented where we integrate IBP in a supply chain scenario together with some applications on the Azure platform.
Cool. So basically, two topics that you've been experiencing on, and again, you had published 2 related blog posts on this, which we'll obviously also put in the show notes so that everyone can take a look at. And I think in these scenarios, you were also working with Bartosz, or Bartosz was also providing some inputs there. Bartosz, you have been on the show before, but maybe you can still quickly introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bartosz Jarkowski. I'm a product manager in the Azure core team at Microsoft. And well, what I want to say at the beginning, Dominik, it was great pleasure working with you on these new features, new reference architectures that allow to connect IBP system and Microsoft solutions. And also want to mention that this is a joint work of a wider team. So Holger, you were engaged in this as well, and there was a big team behind these 2 solutions. Of course, me and Dominik, we are today talking about this, but just want to say a great kudos to everyone who are engaged in solutioning of this.
Cool. So Dominik, let's start with the Teams integration, the adaptive card integration that you worked on. Can you maybe quickly talk about this scenario? Why did you take a look at that? Why is this so interesting?
Yeah, sure. So let me take my slide deck as to start with, and then I can go a little bit deeper into it with a blog post where I'm explaining most of the parts in it. Okay. So what did we do with the adaptive cards? Why was it interesting for us? So we were originally experimenting some of the capabilities with integrated business planning and the Ariba network. And Ariba network is usually a place for collaborating network collaboration, basically for supply chain, or also for normal invoicing or finance related applications or scenarios, to be very, very simple and naive on that. And if you take a look at the supply chain processes, usually a buyer would like to get some confirmation from a supplier so that he can confirm the way he is doing his planning. Sometimes he also likes to get confirmation about products that could be delivered at a particular location, or even capacity of a particular shop floor, for example. So there are a variety of cases down there. Now, the interesting thing here is how can we leverage adaptive cards from Microsoft to enable a faster response or a very quick information that we could provide to a supplier or a buyer in this entire process. So talking about the process, let me explain a little bit about the process here. So what we did is we have an S/4HANA system, and we imported the S/4HANA master data into an IBP instance.
Mhm.
And in the IBP instance, we created all the artifacts that are related for planning. And we also use Excel as a tool for visualizing a planning view. And from Excel, what we did is we triggered a flow which potentially pulls the data from IBP, prepares the messages for the Ariba network, and posts them over the Ariba network as a buyer, and this information reaches the supplier. Now, when it reaches the supplier, this is where we are using adaptive cards to provide a snapshot of what we send over the Ariba network
Mhm.
to the buyer via Teams. Now, there are two interesting use cases down here. One is imagine a supplier getting hundreds of such requests from different buyers or even from a single buyer, for example, but having a snapshot of what the request contains, it helps him to quickly make a decision or set his priorities without even logging into the Ariba network.
Mhm.
So this is one advantage, but it doesn't necessarily need to be the only way to do it. It is just an alternative, and a very good alternative to provide a quick snapshot just in his normal communication tools that he have. That's one use case. Another interesting thing is if he wants to trigger subsequent processes. For example, he wants to collaborate with his team members on deciding what orders he wants to process first. Maybe on a Teams channel, some of the people who are involved in the decision making could vote for a specific order from a buyer based on their local knowledge. For example, inventory of a specific product is very high at a particular location, and you have an order exactly matching those requirements, then he could give an immediate preference to that. He could react immediately, and this gives them a kind of a collaborative decision making based
Mhm.
on data which is available for him within a few seconds, or needless to log into multiple systems. And the whole team has this information in the Teams, so you don't need to have the entire team log into Ariba and know the data, but sharing this detail over Teams, you get a snapshot of what the buyer sent, buyer's request, and this is shared across the whole team. And then the team can make their vote on what could be the highest priority, or where do we have stocks, or what their opinion is about a particular order or a particular request from a buyer. So it enhances the collaborative nature of
Yeah.
of a request that is coming from a buyer across a supply chain. So
So
these
it's
are,
really
yes,
So,
please.
so it's really the notification basically that I as a supplier get an active notification, I get an extract of the relevant information, and then I can still obviously decide, oh, now I really need to take a look at Ariba and take more information, retrieve additional information. So it's this notification aspect, and it's the first start basically of a collaboration that I
Exactly.
can now start my collaboration. I can pull in additional colleagues. Maybe they don't even know of Ariba, but they help me in the decision-making process. I have
Yes.
the relevant information in my Teams channel now, and I can collaborate with them.
Exactly. And it also opens a door for another enablement here. So you don't need to necessarily see this as a one-way communication from SAP to Microsoft, or via Microsoft platform on the adaptive cards, but you can also see it as a bidirectional way. For example, the adaptive cards have the possibility to embed actionable triggers in it. For example, a button to accept an order or cancel an order. In this use case, what we did is we configured an IBP instance as a supplier. Now, once the supplier gets the adaptive card, he could also have a button to trigger some kind of a download into his IBP system. For example, in this proof of concept, what we did is once you are interested in a specific order, or you are interested in all the orders, what you can also do is you can have a button that triggers an action. And this action could literally pull the data from the Ariba network and insert this data back into IBP in a specific planning area, which the supplier has prepared for that particular use case. So of course, you need to have different types of key figures, different types of planning levels, but it's absolutely up to the customer to define, the buyer and the supplier to define how he wants it. And here we are leveraging the SAP Cloud Integration Suite for the different payload extraction from IBP or from Ariba network, but also preparing the payloads that are needed for the Microsoft Azure platform to generate these adaptive cards. Right, and this is also another interesting thing that I see, that as a supplier, you can pull this data from the Ariba network and you can use the adaptive card as a trigger to start the pull down process. Actually,
that's a good idea. Yeah. Can you show us how the adaptive card or how the flow would look like?
Yeah, so I have prepared, I've written a blog down here explaining the different aspects of how we are using adaptive cards here. This is the high level flow that I just shared with you. And we need a logic app on the Azure platform. And here is a screenshot of the logic app itself, where it receives a HTTP request that is coming from the Cloud Integration Suite. And there is a JSON payload that is actually passed based on the payload that we sent on the Ariba network. And then based on this information, we are preparing the adaptive card. And once the adaptive card reaches the supplier, this is how it looks like in his Teams channel. So here you see that's a forecast request that came from the SAP Integrated Business Planning. You have the details, and of course, this is not a hard-coded one. You can define how you want this layout to look like. So as I said before, you have the different products, the timeline, and you also have the quantity. So this gives you literally a snapshot of what is being sent from the buyer, and you can literally share this across your teams, and people can vote for it based on what this is. And this gives them a very quick this gives them a possibility to converse over a particular order and make a collaborative decision. And you also have a data-based, a data-driven decision down here. And the third one that I said here is you can use these actionable buttons to either import this data into your IBP system. This is an example. Of course, you can have your own idea of what you want to do what you want to do with this data, right? Yeah, this is how it looks like from the Teams channel.
Cool. No, I think I really like this. That the concept that now I have the relevant information or the extract information in Teams. I can pull in some other colleagues, and then once we come to a decision, we can still jump back to the IBP system, then do some updates there and work from there. So we have this full circle. The information comes from IBP, finally reaches me as the supplier. I work on this, and then I can do some actions on this later on as well.
Absolutely, that's right. Yeah.
Cool. That's a really great flow. Now, let's maybe completely change the topics. I mean, now we have the collaboration aspect, but you also worked in another really interesting scenario where it's all about leveraging Azure Machine Learning in your scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is an interesting topic because this was actually a request that originally came from a customer itself, and we also found that a justifiable request. Now, what we are doing in the SAP Integrated Business Planning is we are doing different types of planning. We are doing different types of forecasting, so to say. And for these forecasting processes, we are using algorithms that are implemented in the SAP system. Say it could be on the S/4HANA in the HANA database inside the libraries there, or it could also be algorithms that were developed and implemented along with the product itself. But they are, for the customer, they are kind of a black box, and they do some calculation. They are validated. They are industry proven algorithms, and this is what a customer gets out of the box. And for 99% of the customers, they are more than sufficient to provide their own forecast. But imagine there are customers who have developed their own algorithms, who like to experiment with their own options. They want to bring in their own agility into the planning process by including other variables or other processes or data that could not be just modeled inside an IBP instance, for example. So they like to implement their own forecasting methodologies or algorithms itself. Now, how they do it, and this is a proof of concept that we did together with Microsoft using the Azure ML platform. And we have developed a set of APIs, and using the APIs, what happens is we are trying to enable the planning on, or at least trying to do the computation or the calculation process on the Azure cloud. Now, as said before, in the previous demo, we have an IBP instance. We have prepared a planning area there, and we use our Excel as a tool to view the planning part. And what we did is we have created a custom algorithm on the Azure Machine Learning platform. And we have exposed that implementation as an endpoint, and this endpoint is reachable from over the internet, and it is a public endpoint that is residing on the Microsoft Azure cloud. Then we have modeled a forecast method inside the IBP platform. And when we trigger this forecast method, what happens is there is a trigger that is going from the IBP instance to Cloud Integration Suite. And this Cloud Integration Suite is making the necessary API calls to the IBP instance to pull the data, extract the data, extract the metadata, and then push these details to the endpoint on the Azure ML platform. And there, the custom algorithm does all the calculation and then gives us back the result. And this will be a forecast result. And this is an example of how customers can implement their own custom logic on the Azure Machine Learning platform, but still use the refined, prepared data that comes from IBP for that particular algorithm that is externally implemented. So here you see here's a screenshot of the planning view itself from Excel. Once we have modeled a forecast for doing external calculations, that is available for you in this drop-down menu. This is a menu ribbon that you see on top of this Excel that is coming from the Excel add-in, Excel plugin actually, from SAP. And this Excel plugin gives you quite a lot of tools that are used between Excel and the IBP application. And once when you press the simulate and select on the statistical forecasting menu item, you will be able to see all the forecast models that have been prepared for that particular planning area in this IBP instance. And here you see there is the model called the external forecasting CIS, which is actually the model that is prepared for integrating with the Azure platform. And sorry, pardon me. And on the left-hand side, you see some of the attributes, some of the key figures, some of the values that are available for the external algorithm. And when pressing this external forecast algorithm, this data that you see here is actually sent over the integration suite. And here are some of the process steps from the Cloud Integration Suite, which is pulling the data from IBP, preparing the data for the algorithm that is implemented on the Azure Machine Learning platform. And once the data is posted to the Azure Machine Learning, then the response from that calculation is again inserted back into the IBP instance. Right, and here is a screenshot of how you could use the notebooks on the Azure Machine Learning Studio to implement your own algorithm. Now, interesting thing with the Machine Learning Studio is you have quite a lot of tools which you can use to build your algorithm. So it is not just only a script editor. You also have an automated ML. You have a designer which can reuse multiple blocks in a kind of a flow methodology. And but you can also use very native Python script, which you are used as a data science engineer. And you have quite a lot of flexibility on how you want to implement your algorithm. And this gives you a complete transparency about the algorithm that you are implementing there. So it's not a black box there. It is literally up to you to design and implement how your algorithm should look like, what you want to do with the algorithm. And this is exactly what customers want sometimes. And this is also the intention of the external forecasting API, that customers bring in their own logic and their own algorithm. And this is a perfect tool for such an activity. And once your algorithm is implemented here, you can expose this as an endpoint, and this endpoint is available for you. So this is an example of an endpoint being an algorithm being deployed at an endpoint. And once you have the endpoint deployed, you can also take a look at the logs on the different calls that are landing here. And here you see some of the calls that we tested from Postman. And this is then that's the end of that's the endpoint itself. And we configure this endpoint in the Cloud Integration Suite, and SAP Cloud Integration Suite then calls that endpoint at that particular HTTP request and pulls the data back after the algorithm calculates the forecast. And this data is then inserted into IBP, and the user sees only the result of the calculation. So from a planner's perspective, he does not see any of these complications on machine learning or the endpoints or even the Cloud Integration Suite. He doesn't see that at all. All he sees is just this Excel, and he does some he does a planning view, selects a particular statistical forecast method, and once he's done with that, his results are passed to the external algorithm. The calculation is done, and he sees the results in a very few seconds in his Excel sheet itself. So that is an interesting user experience where all the complexity is completely hidden from the planner's point of view, from the planner's perspective. And he uses his Excel for his planning, like he use IBP for his planning, but here only all the calculation is done in Microsoft Azure platform.
Now, that's actually a pretty cool scenario. And as you said, I, as the planner, I continue to just use my Excel sheet. I work there, and from there, I can call or now leverage very customized, very individual training models on my Azure Machine Learning. And basically, CPI, the Cloud Integration Suite, is the glue between my Excel sheet in the end and the endpoints on the Azure Machine Learning side. That's really a nice scenario.
Absolutely.
And I'm really excited about this because this shows how two technologies from two different companies can work together to help customers. So I always remember the words from Satya, who said about companies that need to invest in tech intensity to gain this competitive advantage. And this is a real example of that, of how can they do it. They can take the data from SAP IBP system, which is fed with data from the entire SAP ecosystem, and connect this with our superior technology when it comes to machine learning. And many customers can use Azure also to have their own data estate in our data lake. And this data, which sits outside of us SAP system, can also be a source in the Azure machine learning algorithms. So you can really combine two words to make data-driven decision, and that the data is exactly in the center, which drives what you do. And this is really great. I very often in our life, I think we see that AI is just added to solutions.
Yep.
When it's not needed. And I was laughing when you said about your comment about AI earlier today, and I immediately thought, for example, about the toothbrush with AI technology. but here, this is really, really cool because you have two large data sets that can drive how you run your company. And I'm really excited about this cooperation, Dominic. Thank you very much for doing this with us. And I look forward for our further improvements because, we have additional things planned.
Yeah, that's right. This exercise is not about proving which platform is great or big. This is more or less focused extremely on helping customers to give them the customization they need, but also giving them a comfortable user experience. That's the main target of this. So in the IBP world, you have a lot of algorithms that are implemented, but if customers want to tweak these algorithms, it's not possible because you have to open up that box, right? You need to, customers have to write some code, implement that, customize that, and they need to know a lot about IBP and the plugins that are the APIs that are in there. But in this approach, using Microsoft Azure Cloud, the customers bring their own complexity, their own ideas, and implement that in a container, literally. And their logic and their complexity is completely separated from the business logic down here, and this gives them an enormous time or resource to focus only on what they want to implement. So their customization or their focus is literally the highest priority, and they have that freedom using the Microsoft Azure Cloud, and that's the most interesting or the most valuable thing out of here. Now, as a next step, we want to understand what happens if data gets more complex and what kind of other possibilities you have in the Microsoft Azure cloud. For example, can you go into traditional machine learning methodologies like training a model, preparing the model as an endpoint, and later having a life cycle process around that model? For example, if you want to enhance the model as days grow, as years go, can you have multiple versions of the model? How would the user experience be about the life cycle of the model itself? So these are some of the things that we want to look into as our next step. And but for this moment, this is a very interesting starting point. And we have written a blog about this entire process end to end. And the links for this blog would also be shared along with this podcast. Yeah.
Cool, fantastic, Dominik. I think these are some really cool use cases, and I actually love the breadth of the scenarios that we're talking about. So one is really end user focused, collaboration focused, where we bring the collaborative functionalities of teams into the SAP digital supply chain. So I think that is one really exciting thing, and obviously also. Since I've been working on these Teams integration with other lines of businesses at SAP, so this is for me one really cool end user facing thing. But then at the same time, also this much more deeper integration on a as you said, not so visible for the end user, but behind the scenes, where we have the possibility to enhance an existing process on the SAP side and bring in flexibility, like what you said, with a very customized algorithm, where SAP obviously has a fantastic set of pre-delivered models that the customer can use out of the box. But then there are things where I, as a customer, maybe have specific needs, where I want to have a certainly trained model that is available on Azure ML, or that I want to train now and build. And now that I have the possibility to connect this functionality into my IBP process, I think that's really powerful. So I think it's really fantastic what you have done already, and I'm really looking forward to the next steps that we are doing in this area. Good. With this, I think we're at the end. Thank you so much, Dominik, Bartosz, for joining us. Thanks for all the insights, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you again on the podcast in the future.
Thank you very much, colleagues. It was wonderful working with you, and I really enjoyed the collaboration that we have here, and also the results that are coming out of this that are so helpful, that are very meaningful for customers, I hope. And thank you very much for the opportunity too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.